So without a doubt, on Saturday there was a lot of big games, a lot of big things happening. But the court storming at Wake Forest, whenever Wake Forest took down Duke for the first time in a long time, that was obviously a pretty hot topic. Will, did you got any opinions on this? Do you agree with Coach Shire?
Well, that's the second incident of a court storming potentially harming a star player. The first, I think it was a few weeks ago, Caitlin Clark was also ran into in a similar fashion as Kyle Filipowski. I think Kyle is walking away a little bit more injured than Caitlin was. I think he has like a sprained ankle or something like that. Do you have any update? Like, is he going to be out?
I don't know if he's going to miss time, but I think the difference between the two is he felt like his was intentional, whereas Caitlin Clark kind of said that it was unintentional, just like contact that was incidental almost. So do you think the two are comparable?
I mean, in a way. I mean, it's the best player on the opposing team getting hit. I don't think either of them were intentional. I think Caitlin Clark was a bit more mature. Did you also see Kyle Filipowski's tweets?
I did not.
He tweeted something about the court storming, saying how it was bad, and then 20 minutes later, I guess he hit 1,000 points against Wake Forest, and all the tweet said was "Yay, 1K points." That was it. No punctuation, anything. It was like he was playing down the significance of him crossing a very significant milestone. I guess, with the loss and the potential injury, he probably didn't care too much, but I don't know. Definitely didn't seem to be in a very good mood.
I mean, it's a very difficult situation. I did think that his was a little bit more intentional than Caitlin Clark's. Whenever you look at it, that a fan pushes him after he already runs into the first fan. The second fan kind of gives him a nudge, and I guess the Duke staff kind of got into it with some people that were running by as well. I just don't think it was. I'm not defending Kyle Filipowski. I'm not defending Wake Forest. I just think that it should be handled a little bit differently than how it is. Just because if you look at the win against UConn, Creighton before the game ended, they started getting the security that was holding the student section back, and they shifted them over to line up against the UConn bench where they were shaking hands. And I felt like that was a pretty good way of doing it. It's a good showcase that, one, it's attainable. It's not, we don't have to permanently get rid of it. But second of all, there's good way and bad ways of handling it. But to me, that's what makes college basketball. When you think about college basketball, you think about court stormings, buzzer beaters, Cinderella teams. And if you take one of those away, then it's not the same. Can you imagine Tennessee beating Alabama last year and them not storming the field, or us not storming the field? Remember that?
Yeah, storming the field at that game was incredible, and I honestly think that just fans in general have, they just storm courts and fields too often. I think UConn Creighton, for example, and you're right, Creighton definitely handled it better, preparing for it and making sure the UConn players were able to get to their benches and in the locker room safely before all hell broke loose. But, before the loss to St. John's today, Creighton was top 10, right? Definitely top 15. I think they're going to be a 3 or 4 seed. 17, either way. But a really good team. I think the spread before the game was maybe 2.5, right? Because I think you had UConn minus 2.5 and I had Creighton money line. But
put that in there.
Yeah. Before, I feel like it has to be a huge upset. And that was a massive win for Creighton, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I just think those moments should be reserved for very special wins, and very unexpected wins. And it seems like every time Purdue loses, they get the court stormed on them. And I don't know. I just feel like it should be reserved for the most, What games you look back on and remember?
Yeah, I see both sides of the point because Wake Forest was favored in their game against Duke.
Yeah,
So it wasn't even an upset by Vegas standards, but it's the first time that they've beat Duke at home in like 15 years or something crazy. Like it had a lot of significance to the fan base. It wasn't an upset though. So yes, it probably wasn't warranted that they stormed the court if you look at it from a non-emotional perspective. But if you look at it from I'm a Wake Forest fan and I've watched every basketball game for the past 20 years and I haven't seen us beat Duke at home, then I think that it would be it would change the circumstances a little bit. I mean, it's the same thing with
yeah,
Tennessee, Alabama. I mean, Tennessee was not a bad team when we played them, obviously. I mean, like we won 11 games that year. So, but as a Tennessee fan, not ever seeing us beat Alabama since growing up, basically since like 2008 or something, or 2007, it had a lot of emotional significance. So,
yeah. No, that makes sense. I agree.
They storm the court too often. I agree with that. It definitely could be handled better.
Yeah, no doubt. It should be, if the fans are going to storm, the schools should know and prepare for it, similar to what Creighton did. But I don't know. I just think fans in general need to. I don't like seeing 2 or 3 court storms a week, because then it's like when there's one once a month, it's like, okay, this is awesome. When there's 10 a month, it's not as cool, you know?
Fair enough. Another big thing that happened in college basketball, and I don't know if you saw this, but did you watch any of the Ole Miss South Carolina game?
I did not catch much of it.
Alan Founigan, he's a transfer from Auburn. He plays for Ole Miss this year. He, in the middle of the game, was going down the court and intentionally just elbowed a South Carolina guy and immediately got ejected. But I thought it was worth mentioning just because you don't really see that often anymore. But it's almost like the severity of the punishment. He probably won't miss multiple games. And what's wild to me is the severity of the punishment has stayed the same, but you never see people do that anymore. Any fights or any sort of like ejections. I feel like it's very uncommon now. Do you think that college basketball has gotten a little softer, or do you think that just people are holding their tempers a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw one like this past week, maybe last week. I don't know if you saw it, and I think it was an Alabama guy, but there's a player from the other team on the ground, and there was a loose ball, and don't quote me on this if it wasn't Bama, but he just like hit the dude on the ground. So like I had the same like shock reaction of that was completely unnecessary. They're definitely gonna review that and toss him. But I mean, it's just a dumb play. I think you don't see it because as the sport has advanced, like plays like that where you're giving the other team 2 free throws in the ball and, obviously a team foul. It's just dumb on every level. There's no benefit to it. So I just think as the game is advanced, it's kind of a trim the fat thing. So just now that the sport is in a better place and people are smarter and the competition is better, I just think we don't see those plays that often. And, I mean, it's definitely a good thing because, I mean, I don't think anybody likes seeing those plays either.
To be a devil's advocate, though, in the NBA you see it a lot more. And it's just, to me, it's because those guys are around and they play the same teams and certain guys don't like other guys. Do you think it's because that there's less seasoned teams out there in college basketball compared to in the past where you had a lot of guys that stayed all 4 years and 5 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the NBA, I think it's important to note that they play an 82-game regular season, so there's a bigger margin for error for some of those dumb plays. And then, I mean, the other big thing is just age and maturity. I'm still not very smart now, but I'm definitely smarter than I was when I was 18 years old. And a lot of these guys that we're watching and talking about, they're still just kids, still learning how to, operate as human beings. A bunch of them were in high school this time last year. So, getting to watch, young men grow up and do exceptional things for their teams is, it's really cool. And sometimes they make some mistakes. No, I mean, it's cool. Sometimes
you approach that like a dad right there.
Well, especially gambling on college basketball, it's hard because you have to remind yourself like they're gonna do dumb stuff because they're kids and they're not professionals, and it's aggravating sometimes. But yeah, I mean, they're people and they're young people on really big stage and a lot on the line for them and their families, and sometimes they're gonna do dumb stuff. So that's just my perspective on trying to not get frustrated when I'm rooting for a team.
I can speak for all sports gamblers that the $25 I have on their game is worth more. But whatever, we'll change. We'll change this. This is. I don't really know if this fits in the biggest stories of college basketball, but I've been interested with Kentucky recently just because they have had big wins at Auburn. They turn around, they go at LSU and lose to one of the worst teams in the conference. Even though LSU is red hot, I understand that they beat some ranked teams recently, but still, that's a game they should never lose. And then they host Alabama. They struggled at home this year, and they beat the brakes off of them. I think they shot like 60% from the field and like 55% from three. They were just unstoppable. But what do we?
Alabama probably did too. I mean, they have as much firepower offensively as anybody in the country. They have two of the best guards in the country who are both going to be top 10 picks. They have them coming off the bench. Like, they're awesome. They just, a lot of times, don't play defense. So when those shots aren't going in, they're very, very beatable. I think they're one of the most fun teams in the country to watch for sure. And yeah, they still have a chance to actually end up winning the conference. I think they are like 9-4 or in the conference. I think they're like 2 games back from Tennessee and Alabama, and they have a pretty easy remaining schedule. They have, obviously the big game against Mississippi State this week, but then after that, they have Arkansas and Vanderbilt at home. So those should be big wins, both of them. And before they go to Knoxville to finish out the season. So if they go 4-0, winning the SEC is definitely still in Kentucky's wheelhouse, and that could bump them up from, they're probably like a 6 or 7 seed right now. That could get them up to a 3 or 4 seed.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like between Tennessee and Alabama, it's a 2-horse race to me, but we can save that for another conversation.
I think the only thing is, like, Tennessee's schedule from here on out is so hard, and I believe Bama's is pretty difficult as well. Yeah, they have to go to Ole Miss, then they get Tennessee at home. Yeah, so I mean that's a tough game for both teams. But I mean, Bama plays Florida. They go to Florida on March 5th. Anybody could win that game. That'll be a fun one to watch because Florida's been playing great too. So the SEC is definitely coming down to an exciting finish at the end of the year.
It will be. I just think, to me, Kentucky, making sense of them, and speaking from a person that's been trying to bet on them, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And I put on StatLux bet the other day, I'm addicted to betting on Kentucky at home, but they rarely win at home. And they lose games that they should win. It's just very frustrating to make sense of.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, you really have to judge Kentucky by the emotion of what their past few games have been. You knew that they were going to come off that LSU win or LSU loss ready to light it up, a little bit more motivated than they would be. But after a big win against Auburn, stumbling into LSU, I think that betting on them was probably a mistake in hindsight, just because they're not as motivated. It's like when they want to try, they can beat anybody. When they don't want to try, they don't. And it's just very frustrating to watch a talented team like that. But we'll move on.
Sometimes it feels like they had that disease of we're all really good and we're not really sure whose turn it is to score. You know what I mean? I get that vibe when I'm watching Kentucky sometimes. And Antonio Reeves is normally the guy to just be like, if nobody else wants it, I'll shoot it, which is good for them because he's really good. But, I mean, they're just really a team of, if the shots are going in, they're really tough to beat, but they just have hiccups a lot. So definitely, I do not want to play them in the tournament. I don't think anybody would want to play them in the tournament, but I don't think they're a Final Four team.
Yeah, they have too many flaws. Moving on to Houston and a recap of last week. Houston was a big part of what was going on. They seem to be playing quality opponents every time you turn the TV on. They started the week at Iowa State came to them, and then they finished it out going to Baylor, and they won both of these games. But beforehand, it was kind of starting the narrative of, well, me and you were kind of starting the narrative is Iowa State the best team in the Big 12? And I think this past week kind of proved something different for Houston. They really took command of the conference, and I was super impressed of them. Willwood, did you see anything from Houston last week between those two games?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it last week, and we talked about both these games. And, I wasn't super shocked that they ended up getting the win over Iowa State. I bet on them to cover. I think it was like 8.5 or 9.5. They ended up not covering by like a point, which was really frustrating. Yeah. But then I really thought they would win that game, which they did, and then I thought they would lose to Baylor. I didn't think they would win both. So, I mean, just two huge wins because Iowa State and Baylor were second and third in the Big 12, I think. So getting head-to-heads were huge for tournament seeding and conference tournament seeding. I mean, Houston's definitely one seed no matter what they do from this point on, I would say. But yeah, they've solidified themselves as the best team in a really good conference with two massive wins. And while they're not very fun to watch, KenPom, they're first in adjusted defense efficiency and 16th in adjusted offensive efficiency. So while their brand of offensive basketball might not be my favorite to watch, it's definitely effective, and it's why they've had such a great season to this point. I'm still out on them in the tournament, I think. I don't really know who in the Big 12 I think is going to be a Final Four team, but I don't know. It might just be my dumb brain saying they're not very good because I don't like how they play, but as of now, there's no question they're the best team in their conference.
I don't think that's a dumb take at all. I'm out on Houston as well when it comes to March Madness, and just because when it comes to March, you always think about the teams that make a run are the teams that can really score the basketball and have great guard play. And Houston can't shoot. I think
they have that one guy who made the buzzer beater, Shed, I believe is his name.
But other than that, I mean, I bet on Houston. I was cheering very, very hard for Houston. But they shot 29% against Iowa State from three, and then they shot, it looks like, 28% against Baylor from three. They just can't shoot, and I don't think that bodes well whenever it gets into in the tournament, especially whenever another team gets hot. They got to keep up with them offensively. I mean, I know that their defense is great, but it just doesn't feel like a team that can make a deep run as poor as shooters as they are.
Yeah, it feels, but I mean, the only thing is they don't really get tripped up. Like all the games they've lost this year have been to like good teams. I think it's Iowa State, TCU, and Kansas. Like none of those are bad losses because they're also all on the road. So I mean, they just take care of business. Like Purdue has slipped up. UConn hasn't really slipped up. So I would say probably Houston and UConn are the only two with like no really bad losses. But I don't know. It is. I hope they're not in the Final Four. Let's just say that.
I do want to talk a little bit more about this Houston Baylor game, just because I thought it was the game of the week. So if you weren't watching it, Baylor, I called Will in the middle of this because I was freaking out.
Yeah.
Houston was killing Baylor in the first half, and then in the second half, everything completely flipped. Baylor was on fire from three, and for me, like I said, I tweeted out Houston -2, and I was sweating that because Baylor had all the momentum in the world. It didn't matter what happened. It seemed like they had an answer for it. But Houston was right there. They kept it close. Final seconds of the game, they dump it down to Missy, and he gets an and one layup, misses the free throw to put them ahead, and then a buzzer beater gets called off to end regulation, and then Houston ends up taking care of business in OT. I thought this game, to me, it's always fun having an entertaining game that your team comes out on top. But for me, this was the most fun game that I've watched since this new year. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It was an awesome finish. I checked the score in the first half, and I saw Houston was up like 15 or 20, like big. And I took Baylor in this one, unfortunately. But then did watch the very end, the last like 5 minutes, and the buzzer beater keeps getting talked about. I mean, the heartbreaker is missing the free throw on the end one. Like, I think he was shooting like 53% from the year. That's always the best when you bet on a team, and then a clutch free throw is coming up, and they flash the stats graphic, and this guy has shot 40% on the year, and he's 2 for 6 from the line today, and it's just like, so there's no chance this is going in. But I mean, you got to make that free throw because I mean they win the game if that goes in. Probably. I mean, Houston could have. I don't know. Did Houston have any timeouts? Did they have an option if
No,
Baylor had made that free throw? Yeah. So
they didn't have time.
and that's just another example of Houston doing the small stuff right to get big wins. But yeah, I agree. It was one of the more fun games we've had in a long time.
Next game, not a fun game. UConn at Creighton. This is a blowout. I bet on the wrong side.
This game was awesome.
I'll let you talk about this because I don't.
The Andrew Ashworth game. It was just from start to finish. It was clear that it was Creighton's night. There's not really like too much else to say about it. Just everything Creighton was throwing up was going in. I think they were up like 20 at halftime. And UConn was due for a game like this. I think it'll end up helping them in the tournament. Just kind of a wake-up game because you saw what they did to Villanova yesterday. I think Coach Hurley probably isn't too upset that they lost that game because he's been able to use that as fuel to, fire up his guys with that passion that he has. So I think UConn will be fine. Was it weird how I said that?
Yeah,
I saw you making a funny face.
It was a bit of a pause moment.
Hey, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. He's a fiery guy, very passionate. He's a yeller. He's fun to watch on the sidelines. Very animated. Obviously, one of the best coaches in the country. So yeah, excited to see what they do in the tournament. Obviously, a projected Final Four team. I think they're like minus 150 to make the Final Four, which is insane. But they're great. Creighton had an awesome night. It was the first time Creighton had beat UConn at home in a long time, I think. So yeah, Coach McDermott went on Pardon My Take. So I listened to an interview with him right after that game, which was fun. So yeah, big for the program and excited to see what both these teams do. But then, I mean, Creighton, followed up with the loss to St. John's today. It's just college basketball makes no sense. Home teams, always.
Home teams. Going down to the SEC, I know we touched on Kentucky. I know we touched on Kentucky at LSU and Bama. I kind of want to speak a little bit more about the Bama side of things. What does it mean for them to lose this game at Kentucky, the way that they did, and then to go and host Tennessee next week? And I mean, you touched on how difficult their schedule is. Do you think that this loss kind of benefits Alabama?
I mean, no, not by any means. Just because they had sole possession of first in the SEC, they definitely wanted to win as much as they could. Not the same as UConn needed a loss to maybe get them out of sleepwalking mode. Bama has been playing great, and in SEC play,
Florida game early.
The Florida game. Yes, the Florida game was awesome. But, I mean, even did you see Nate Oates said, I think everybody in the country knows at this point that we don't guard anybody?
I mean, it's true.
Yeah, but he said that in the presser after the game.
Neither one of the over was so obvious in this game.
But I'm looking, like, Bama's, this is their last few games, how many points they have scored in each game. 117, 98, 100, 109, 99, 99, 85, 109. Those are like NBA point totals. So what's crazy is they lost 3 of those games. and scoring 90 plus.
They go
Oh, wait.
100 miles an hour. It's so fun to watch.
Yeah. But, yeah, they're still definitely a very fun team to watch. Excited to see what they do with their remaining schedule, which is definitely going to be really tough. Got to match up with Tennessee, rematch, another rematch with Florida. They get Tennessee at home this time and Florida on the road, so flip-flopped. They dropped the game to Tennessee, so get to try to split at home, and then they won the game at home against Florida, so they trying to go 2-0 on the road. Definitely going to be tough, but still got a great shot to win the conference.
I think that they're so predictable. Alabama seems like the type of team, like they're going to go and they're probably going to win against Ole Miss and then beat Tennessee, lose to Florida, and then beat Arkansas to finish out the year. To me, I feel like that's just pretty obvious, but I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, and Ken Palm adjusted efficiencies, they're first in offense and 97th in defense.
Like, yeah.
Not what you want to see.
I mean, it makes the SEC basketball like a little bit more fun, especially when you have teams that run as much as Kentucky and Bama do. But
yeah,
holy cow! You just think about if they played defense at half of the capacity as some of the teams that they've played against, like Tennessee. I mean, the sky would be the limit for them. But what is laughable about Bama is they've tried to prop Mark Spears up in the SEC Player of the Year award, and that's just not fair.
I mean, he's been great. I don't. So I think you added a P into his name. I believe it's just Mark Sears. But no matter, and he's been really good. But he's no Dalton Connect.
No, he's not.
He's definitely not Dalton Connect. And Antonio Reeves is probably above him on SEC Player of the Year as well. So, but I mean, after those two, Mark Sears is having as good of a year as anybody.
Yeah. I want to briefly touch on this next game because it was so ugly. But UNC picked up 2 big wins last week. I know you bet on them against Miami, or bet against Miami.
Yeah.
And at Virginia, which was the ugliest game to watch, I think it was like 50 to like 44 or something nuts like that.
Sorry, I bet on Miami against Duke. They haven't. North Carolina plays Miami next week.
That's what it is. Sorry about that.
Tomorrow, actually.
But UNC just took care of business this week, and honestly, it was a pretty impressive week, especially since they've been kind of going through some ups and downs. After they had like a 10-game win streak, they had some struggles against like Georgia Tech. They were dropping games that they probably shouldn't have dropped, but it seems like they're back on track. And the win at Virginia was impressive to me. Virginia played their style of basketball, through and through, slowing it down, making it ugly, and UNC still found a way. So
yeah, this was the worst game of the week by far. So boring to watch. I think Virginia had like 19 points at halftime. And then North Carolina only ended up winning by 10. So just a brutal game to watch, but definitely big for ACC standings because Virginia was up there with Carolina and Duke, and then Duke lost, and Virginia obviously lost to North Carolina and Virginia Tech. So similar to Houston, North Carolina, who's been the favorite to win the conference all year, just taking care of business towards the end of the season, beating teams that they should. Excited to see what they do in the ACC tournament.
Virginia is just the Iowa of college basketball.
They
are so hard to watch. And
everything I don't like about Houston is worse with Virginia.
They play great defense. They play horrible, atrocious offense. They shot 14% from 3 and 27% from the field against UNC. That is gross. I don't know. That's just that's difficult.
Virginia's adjusted efficiencies. Defense, they're 9th. No shocker there. Guess what they are offense? Rank.
How many teams are in? I mean, if you think about it, we have like 100. I'd say like the 127th, something like that.
187th. I don't know how many teams there are, but according to the KenPom metrics, there are 186 teams who are more efficient on offense than the Virginia Cavaliers. So that is not what you want to hear if you're a Virginia fan.
or Iowa football in a
Yep.
nutshell. That's what you watch. We'll touch on this for a second because it was a blowout, but a statement win. Tennessee took care of business against Texas A&M. Wasn't close for the majority of the game. The Vols are hot right now. I love it. They've won 4 straight, taking care of business. Some of it's been ugly. I mean, they lost or they got close to losing against Missouri, and they are awful, a little sleepwalking. But when you look at Tennessee, they have taken care of business and won the games that they're supposed to win. A true test will be kind of coming up on the road as they host Auburn and go to Bama next week. But this week and the last, I guess, the week before this, they've kind of taken care of what they've been supposed to take care of.
Yeah. About to enter the gauntlet though. The Texas A&M game obviously needed a win after losing. What city is Texas A&M in? Do you know?
College Station.
College Station. That's all right. So they lost in College Station. Definitely needed to beat Texas A&M at home. Blew them out. That's huge for the momentum going into the toughest part of the schedule. For the whole year for Tennessee, no doubt about it. If you look at the SEC standings, it's Tennessee's tied for first, and then their last 4 games are the other 4 teams in the top 5. So I think Tennessee will be happy if they win 3 of these. I don't know exactly which one they'll drop because after the Auburn and Alabama gauntlet, then they have to go to South Carolina, which is definitely not a look-over game. South Carolina obviously beat Tennessee in Knoxville. It's going to be tough to beat the Vols twice, so I think I do like Tennessee to win that one. But then Tennessee gets another shot at Kentucky, and you know Kentucky's going to be looking for revenge after what happened in this first matchup earlier this year. Excited to see what Tennessee does finishing out the year, but it's definitely going to be difficult for them to hang on to the 1 seed in the conference tournament.
To me, I think Tennessee will win against Auburn, lose against Alabama, win against South Carolina, and man, you could flip a coin with that Kentucky game just because we always split with Kentucky. But
I mean, there's a chance to go 4-0.
There's a chance, but there's also a chance where they go 0-4. Like that's a very real possibility. So
that's what I was gonna say. It could be 4-0 or 0-4, and you know, I don't think either would be too shocking.
My projection is 3-1, or the most probable projection is 2-2. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, I agree.
But I don't know. I think right now the model has UT favored by 4 whenever we host Auburn on Wednesday night. And when we go to Bama, they have Bama favored by 3.5. Not by they, I mean our model.
Yeah,
so
no,
I think those numbers are spot on.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with either of those. Maybe Tennessee's defense can give Bama some shooting troubles that they haven't seen in a few weeks. Obviously, just scoring 1 million points, but Tennessee just sometimes has a tendency, like in the first half against Missouri, where they just look dead. And, you know, if they have one of those games in this next little stretch, like it's going to be tough to recover like they did against Missouri. So definitely need to be on their A game. And, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they split these first 2 against both those teams from Alabama.
When you think about it, if Tennessee sleepwalks in the first half of Alabama, they might just drop 100 points on us. And
yeah, exactly.
For a Rick Barnes coach team, that is just something you don't see. So
no,
hope it doesn't happen, but it definitely could.
Yep.
Team we've talked about a ton this week. Kentucky plays at Mississippi State early in the week, and I like to talk about this game because I like Mississippi State in this one. I think coming off a big emotional win, much like last week whenever they beat Auburn, this is the LSU trap game, and Mississippi State's a lot better than LSU. They're physical. They can play with anybody, especially whenever they're at home. I think Mississippi State wins big here. And Kentucky is a team that doesn't like to defend. Mississippi State, they score a lot of their points in the paint, and I think that does not bode well for Kentucky because they're not, by nature, a very physical team. I don't know. I like Mississippi State by a lot. Our model has them by 3 right now. but I figured that would kind of get a reaction out of you.
Do you like them enough to take an alternate spread? Let's say the line is 4.5. Mississippi State 4.5. Would you move it to 9.5 to say they're going to win by double digits? Are you that confident?
I think it would be worth half a unit. I wouldn't put a full unit on it, but if you look at it, I think it just screams a game that Kentucky is not well suited to play in, and also is emotionally not as involved as what they would normally be, coming off a big win against Auburn that was kind of or Alabama that was kind of built up.
Yeah, my thought on this game is I'll probably just bet on whoever the underdog is because it's huge for both teams. Kentucky in terms of seeding, and I think Mississippi State's right on the bubble right now. So getting a signature win would definitely put them in a better spot to make the tournament, obviously. Mississippi State team to watch in the NIT if they are in the NIT because I like them as well. But yeah, if Kentucky is underdogs, I'll probably bet on them to win just because, it's kind of a coin flip. They're either going to be awesome or not awesome, and I'm just going to bet them and hope the awesome version shows up.
I'm telling you, if the number comes out that it is below 5 in Mississippi State's way, you will see this on Stathletics. That is happening.
It might be another in the bets where we've gone against each other. I'm 1-0, which I love.
Yeah.
So I might have, if you tweet out Mississippi State, I might have to fade you. Kentucky money line, give me the units.
I hope you do. Next game, Baylor at TCU. TCU right now, our model has them favored by 3. And I thought this was interesting too because Baylor's coming off such an emotional loss. They, in the Big 12 standings, every game matters. TCU, I think, is kind of on the bubble. Maybe they're in. I'm not sure. They were ranked for a little bit. That fell off. But that was kind of dumb. They're in, I think.
I think they're a bubble team as well. Hold on. They've lost 3 out of their last 6, so that doesn't bode well. But the Big 12 is just so good. I think they're a bubble team. A win, they probably need to win this game to get in.
Either way, I like TCU here. I think that Baylor might be emotionally drained. TCU really needs this game. Probably needs it worse than Baylor. And they've proven that they can beat quality opponents at home. So
yeah, if you tweet this one out, I'll be fading you again. Baylor coming off 2 losses. I know it's on the road, and I know it's a Big 12 game. So you bet on the home team in Big 12 games, no matter who it is. I've told myself that a million times, but I'm going to go against that rule just because I think Baylor is a better basketball team, and they've dropped 2 in a row, one to BYU, one to Houston, both 2 really good teams. I don't think TCU is on that same level. They're kind of comparable with BYU, not quite as good. So yeah, bounce back spot for the Baylor Bears. Get some momentum heading into the end of the year.
Will. Baylor's already gone on a pretty long losing streak this year. Let me go find it.
Yeah, they have.
They lost to – and I was on the wrong side of this. They lost to Kansas State at Kansas State, lost to Texas at Texas, and then they had TCU at home. And I bet this game. I bet Baylor, and I was like, no way they go on a 3-game skid. And they did. They went on a 3-game skid. I'm not betting on Baylor to not go on a 3-game skid at the hands of TCU again. I think TCU stamps that 3rd loss.
I think it's going to be tough for TCU to go 2-0 against Baylor. They definitely could, but I don't know. In conference games with pretty similar caliber teams, it seems like they split most of the time. So I will.
But you don't usually see them split whenever they win away and then go lose at home. That just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I see your point. Kentucky has a chance to do it.
They do
against Tennessee, but I just think Baylor's better. I think both these 2 games we've just talked about, you like the matchup for the home team, which I totally understand. I'm just going to take who I think is the better team, especially if I'm getting plus money for it. I'll say the exact same thing. I'll take the money line of whoever the underdog is in both these games. So if it comes out Baylor's a 2.5-point favorite, then I'll take TCU. But just chasing those plus signs, baby.
With Baylor, they play. I know that I'm going to get. Me and you will agree on this one just because how you view Kansas. But they later in the week they host Kansas. The model has them as a 3.5-point favorite. I think that coming off a 3-game skid, which I expect out of them, if they lose to TCU, I love Baylor on Saturday.
Well, isn't
when
Kevin McCullough's hurt, right?
I think he might be back. He's been banged up all year. I don't know if what his status will be for this upcoming week, but I know he's kind of been questionable for a while now.
Yeah, this article says KU's Bill Self expresses concern about Kevin McCullough's knee injury. So that's lingering. Definitely something to keep an eye on because without him, I already have little faith in them. Without him, I have none. So, yeah, if he's out, definitely taking Baylor in that one.
I would love it if Baylor goes on a 3-game skid. They get Kansas at home, their biggest rival. And if you stick 3.5 points out there, I think that they cover that all day. That is not factoring in injuries, so you never know about McCullough and how that's going to affect the line. But, I mean, Kansas has been playing well this year, so who knows? They blew Texas out on Saturday without McCullough, so it wasn't some interesting games. Also, Marquette plays at Creighton. Creighton's coming off that loss to St. John's today. Right now, the model has Creighton at -4 projected on this one. Generally speaking, in the Big East, it's whatever the home team is. They just beat Houston at home, so that place will be nuts. But
UConn.
For whatever reason, I just don't know if I'm as confident in this one as the others.
Yeah, this game is the one that we've talked about that I'm most excited to watch. I think it's just going to be a fun one. 2 definite tournament teams. They're both in. They're both going to be top 5 seeds regardless. Actually, maybe Creighton might not be top 5, but Marquette right now is in sought to be a 2 seed. So this win would probably solidify Marquette as a 2 seed, and Creighton obviously getting a win over a top 10 team would bump them up even more. So both teams going to be playing really hard, rivals. It's going to be fun. In terms of who I like, I probably am going to need to see the spread. I'm not going to bet the underdog blindly in this one. I think this is a good opportunity to take some points as it'll probably be a close game. So if it's, Creighton -5 or something like that, I'd probably take Marquette plus the points. But yeah, this one is going to be very fun to watch. Looking forward to it.
Will be fun. I know we touched on South Carolina earlier, and I think at this point they might be the most profitable team to bet on this year. They cover the spread at a rate that's higher than anybody else, just because they weren't expected to be anything. They play at Texas A&M, and then they host Florida later in the week. Both of these are losable games. Both of these are games that kind of are trap games because South Carolina doesn't play very fast and Florida plays very fast. And then obviously at Texas A&M is just a tough get coming off a loss at Tennessee. So, they'll be highly motivated and they're a bubble team in their own right. So what do you make about these 2 games and how do you think they'll end up?
I think Texas A&M might have their way with South Carolina, similar to how they did with Tennessee when Tennessee went to College Station. And then I think South Carolina could drop both these games, honestly. But that's another me being a prisoner of who I like watching, and Florida is really fun. So, yeah, I still am not a full believer in South Carolina. I think they've played as well as they could, given their roster up to this point in the year. Only really 2 bad losses. They only have 5 losses on the whole year, which is insane, and none of them are to terrible teams. The only out-of-conference loss was to Clemson. You want to pick up wins against LSU and Georgia, but those aren't terrible losses. And I really think at some point it's going to catch up to them, and it could be this week into next week, and they could drop 3 in a row.
Yeah, right now the model has them as 5-point dogs at Texas A&M and 2-point favorites whenever they host Florida. I like Texas A&M in this one. I think Texas A&M might blow them out. especially just given the situation. They might not make the tournament if they don't get this win against a ranked South Carolina team. Florida concerns me with them just because of the different styles of play are so different, and that causes for more upsets than usual. Just because South Carolina can't win if they play how Florida plays. Florida can't win if they play how South Carolina plays. But either one could easily happen. So we'll see. They definitely could lose both these games. If they win both of these games, you have to start putting them in the conversation of, are they a 2 or a 3 seed? Just based off of how many quality wins they've had and how many losses, or I guess non-bad losses they've had. So, I mean, interesting that it happens. One thing that I want to touch on before we go, if Tennessee wins out, you think that they're a 1 seed?
Yeah, because Arizona lost to Washington State.
I agree. That would be first 1 seed in Rick Barnes' tenure at Tennessee, and it might be the first 1 seed in program history, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, I don't know, because I was just thinking they would need to pass Arizona, but they also might need to pass North Carolina, because Purdue, Houston, and UConn pretty much locked up 1 seeds at this point. It's going to be tough for anybody to jump them unless something drastic happens. So I think I saw today that Arizona, even with the loss to Washington State. Oh, another thing, Washington State go and win at Arizona and then get beat by Arizona State like 3 days later. What is that? But no matter. Yeah, I would like to think that if Tennessee wins out, does conference tournament play, does that impact March Madness seeding?
It does.
Okay, yeah, duh, because the winners of the conference tournaments get auto bids. Duh, that was a dumb question. So maybe Tennessee wins out and then wins the SEC tournament. It'd be tough to not make them a 1 seed, but they're just 4, 5 other teams also with really good resumes and really good spots. So going to be an uphill battle, but worst case scenario, Tennessee is a 3 seed.
If they win out, then they've locked a 2 seed up. They could lose first round in the SEC tournament, and I still they're 2 seed. If they go like 3-1 and then win a couple games or win a game in the SEC tournament, then they're a 2 seed. Like we talked about, worst case scenario, if they end up dropping more than they should and they're a first or second round out in the SEC tournament, then man, I mean, it could get shaky real fast for them. So I don't know. Two tails.
One more thing before we hop off. Now is my favorite time to put in some futures to win the national championship. Do you have any teams that you like or any value spots that you've seen at this point?
I'm pulling them up right now. For me, at the very beginning of the year, and I do this pretty much every year, I put a future on Tennessee basketball to win the Natty, especially since Rick Barnes came to town. It started at plus 2,500. Now it is plus 1,300. And for me personally, I think that was a great value bet. I think North Carolina at plus 2,000 is probably my pick if you're going to pick one, just because they have seniority. They have a former National Player of the Year in Armando Bacot. RJ Davis is playing as good as anybody. And they have the Harrison Ingram newcomer. I mean, I think that they're hard to beat. I think at plus 2,000 that the odds are in their favor and definitely a good value spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't really understand. On DraftKings, North Carolina's plus 1,800. They have the same odds to win the title as Auburn, which makes no sense to me. I figured North Carolina would have much better odds. And then Arizona's plus 1,400. I mean, I don't. When I saw that, I was like, well, North Carolina's definitely the best play there. But a sneaky one that I think would be fun, Michigan State is plus 5,500. And their two best players are A.J. Hoggard and Tyson Walker. And then they have other guys. But two old, really talented guards combined with Tom Izzo. You just never know. And at plus 5,500, you're getting some really juicy odds. So maybe worth a sprinkle. At this point, I don't really think there's anything else worth taking. Like UConn is plus 500. You're not going to bet on somebody to win the tournament before it starts at plus 500. So yeah, excited to see what unfolds as conference play comes to an end and tournaments start. But right now, I think North Carolina and Michigan State are some good value picks.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up this week's show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and I guess we'll see you guys next week.